All right, and we are live. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz, Monday through Friday, usually 12 to 1. Today I do 1 to 2 with Dooovid. Dooovid and I have been talking about religion, particularly Judaism and Israel, in an ongoing series of talk partners in Torah. Dooovid, thanks for joining me.
You too, Charles. Always a pleasure.
So, Dooovid, I had an email from someone the other day who had a show where he talked about the Noahide Covenant. And I'm supposed to call him later today because I asked him if he'd like to come on and talk with me, and he said he can't because he's been banned. I don't know what he was into. Maybe it might have been some Adam Green kind of stuff. I don't know. But I hope to reach out to him. Maybe I'll have him on without putting him on YouTube, of course. I'll just do it on my regular Podomatic networks, which it's not so easy to ban me on those networks because it's a subscription that I pay for. And that goes out to about a half a dozen live stream, or not live stream, but podcasting sites. And that's a growing thing. So I guess that, I figured why not ask you about this? My understanding is that the Noahide Covenant, which was essentially formally developed and codified in the Talmud, nevertheless goes back to the Torah, and it goes back to Noah, which was signified by the rainbow after the flood. And what that signified and what that represented symbolically was a covenant between the Lord God, King of the universe, and all of mankind. And that it was based on the premise that never again would God send a flood to destroy the entire world, even if we are a fallen people, and that there were 7 precepts within the covenant that would apply to all mankind in terms of how we are to govern ourselves, how we're to conduct our lives, how we are to receive salvation, how we are to enter into the realm of the afterlife. So what, from your perspective, Dooovid, as someone who is pretty well versed in issues of the Chabad movement, of Kabbalah, of other things, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, and I have done the research. Like I read probably 20 books and hundreds of scholarly articles. And I plan on doing like a long hours, probably like 5-hour stream that will be mostly me reading from academic papers, because it's an extremely complicated issue. It's a matter of huge dispute, and to some level, understanding how the Noahide laws are perceived is the key to understanding sectarianism, among Jews, because not just what Jews believe or how we do, but how we interact with Gentiles. So the general version that you gave is pretty much accepted from any of, so to say, the Pharisaical schools, from Reconstructionists to ultra-Orthodox Rabbinic Judaism, that, the Noahide laws comes from Noah. And, it's kind of like God's covenant with the Gentiles that's in the Torah. It's written like that God makes a covenant with Noah and his descendants. And that includes the obedience to Noahide laws. So from the Jewish role in that could be very questioned. I've had these, Claire Kaw, who's constantly, in the chat pounding on these issues, and a lot of streamers, Vincent Bruno, who's done a lot of work to stop the Noahide laws, and activists in New York that's pushing to, and he's done a lot of research that I told him it was music to my ears, but how many legislations and official acts around the world, not just in the U.S., but worldwide, have actually signed proclamations into law that say the basis of the law is the Noahide laws. In the U.S., most U.S. presidents and senators and legislative bodies have passed acts in favor of the Noahide laws. So, what that means for how Messiah in the end of times is going to unfold, or the relationship between Jews and Gentiles, because from some perspective, the Noahide laws have absolutely nothing to do with Jews.
Nothing at all.
It was a covenant
before Judaism. I mean, they came at the very beginning of man, and I think that you're right to point out that many nations have recognized it. My understanding is that President George H.W. Bush actually signed a proclamation recognizing the Noahide Covenant. People like Adam Green and others, maybe this guy that was banned, they read into this some kind of conspiracy that the Jews are trying to physically control the world, and nothing could be further from the truth. The Noahide Covenant existed before Judaism. It existed with Noah. If you're a Christian, you believe in the Old Testament, what they call the Old Testament, which covers this. I think Islam recognizes this. It's basically a covenant between all of mankind and God, and it is not particularly religious. It's not denominational, as you say. It's not sectarian. It is simply a statement, and there are 7 elements to it, one of which is that there is one God. It's the universal statement. And I think that I would suggest that could even apply to an atheist who doesn't believe in God, but nevertheless recognizes that there is one existence. There's one reality. There are not 2 realities or 3 realities. There's one reality. Secondly, it deals with certain basic ethical questions, like you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not be cruel to animals, which in the broad sense means you should not be overly cruel to any living being. And the final piece, I think one of the 7, calls for a separation of powers. It basically says that a responsible society is called upon to set up a separate, independent judiciary. This is something that was actually implemented by Moses in the desert of Sinai after leaving bondage in Egypt, when he met with his father-in-law, Jethro, and Jethro advised him and said, you're taking on too much work to try to lead your people. You need to set up a council of elders, a council of people who have a level of wisdom to help make decisions separately from you with regard to conflicts in the society and other matters. So that's, in a nutshell, correct me if I'm wrong, what the Noahide Covenant is. It has nothing to do with Judaism or any other religion.
Well, really, so from a scholarly level, almost universally, scholars believe that the Noahide laws entered Judaism in the Roman times, and as with everything in Judaism, we just backtracked it to make it look like that was what we always believed, although the evidence, and this is mostly Israeli and Jewish scholars, is clearly that it was influenced by Roman law and the sages. And if you look in the Talmud, the places that discuss it, that for whatever reason in the Roman period, maybe before the destruction or after, or maybe already in the Greek period, that the sages wanted to indoctrinate something into Judaism in order for how we're going to rule as a nation. I mean, because we were, had Israel under our control, or were rebelling from the Greeks or the Romans, which meant that these were Gentiles living under our law. We're not Jews living under somebody else's laws, but these are Gentiles living under our laws. And that whatever they decided in the Talmud and from rabbinic, so this is the scholarly way of looking at it. You have to, obviously from a academic view, I even had this argument with Adam Green. He just said, this is ridiculous. You can't honestly believe that. You're telling me that because of your, biblical creation story where my supposed ancestor made some covenant that I have to follow these rules. No chance. So I'm saying, from an academic, even if you were in university talking to fellow Jews, your average fellow Jew would probably give the same response as Adam Green. No one believes that Noah is the progenitor of all humankind. No one believes that God made a covenant with Noah, and no one believes that all humanity today is bound by this. Well, I say because we're believers. So if you believe the Bible, that's our cosmology. So it makes sense within the biblical cosmology. And it's kind of like Repair the World, where your average Jew doesn't believe in biblical cosmology, but they do believe in the spirit of Judaism, in this Noahide element. But I say, this guy, Vincent Bruno, who I interviewed on my channel, was brought up Jehovah's Witness, and he's an anti-Noahide crusader, and I guess it makes quite a bit of sense because he's openly homosexual and Hindu, but an idol worshiper. So he's saying that Jews are trying to destroy his life because Jews are trying to implement the Noahide laws, and the Noahide laws are clearly against homosexuality and idol worship. And Adam Green makes the point on Christianity, like, don't think these Jews are so benevolent. The Jews, God forbid, we secretly hate Christianity, want to end the religion. And from a certain practical point of Judaism is yes. From a Jewish point of view, Christianity is like QAnon conspiracy theory. You'd have to be crazy to believe that stuff. No Jew thinks that any rational, right-minded non-Jew actually believes in Christianity. Saying we live in Christian societies, we want to be friendly, but from a Jewish perspective, Christianity is just a false religion, flat out, stop. And if we're embarrassed to say that to our Christian neighbors, it's because of other circumstances. And I'm not ruling as a rabbi, saying like that your rabbis say, but if you read our texts and you get more into Judaism, it's just going to be clear that we fundamentally disagree with Christianity. And if you believe that stuff, it's because you're wrong. And it's not saying it makes you a bad person for being wrong theologically. It's like, believing in QAnon. So the Adam Green, there's a lot of Christians who say, oh, Jews are gonna, trying to end Christianity. And, Lubavitch is the only movement that has officially, and the Rebbe, it wasn't originally one of the missions of the Shliachs, but, the Rebbe did include at a certain point promoting the Noahide laws, probably because most Shliachim deal more with Goyim than Jews. Because if you're going out to a city where there's only a handful of Jews and none of them are Orthodox, most of the people you deal with are non-Jews or interested in Judaism, and a lot of those people want to talk to you about Christianity. Like I've spoken to hundreds of Asians and all sorts of people, and the topic most frequently they want to talk to me about is Christianity. So from a Lubavitch perspective, how to deal with that, what it means to promote the Noahide laws, how vociferous should we be about our opinion that, God forbid, Christianity is largely a false religion, and what does that mean in terms of promoting the Noahide laws, and saying, are we happy? And so it's politically incorrect. And actually, Israel is interesting because Israel actually officially supports Noahide movements by the Israeli government. So, people who go all over the world, specifically non-industrialized countries, more, countries where that people believe in Christianity is already like a good thing for Israel's diplomatic relationships. Like in the Far East and Africa, and there's actually, government Israeli supported organizations supporting the Noahide. But then at the same time, like most Israelis don't want to be put under the Noahide restrictions because, it's possible you could interpret, and I'm a pretty liberal interpreter because I think that, you could have a very lenient or a very strict interpretation of the Noahide as long as it's transparent, and I view that almost all societies could have a Noah compliant version. But I could see that from a legitimate perspective, that you think like, what if Jews win at the end? Are they going to make being Christian illegal? And from a certain perspective, you say like, well, as a Jew, like, yeah, I mean, I think after Messiah comes, there's not going to, it's not going to be Jesus, it's not going to be Christianity. The people
but it's not going to be the Jews that would do that. I mean, that's more of a spiritual question. Now, let me dig down a little bit here. First of all, yes, the modern understanding of the Noahide Covenant probably emanated out of the Roman period. That's when the Talmud was codified, during the Roman period. So, and it certainly was probably influenced by the Romans. I mean, Rabbi Yehuda Hanazi, the prince, the Judah the prince, who was the first one to codify the Mishnah, he had a correspondence with Marcus Aurelius, who was the
probably business, because Roman law would have been the law that presided over the whole of the area. So, the rabbis wanted Jewish law, especially in terms of dealing with Gentiles, to be more.
But I think they were more fundamentally influenced by it. And Marcus Aurelius, of course, was the author of Reflections. He was the first of the Aurelian emperors who were very enlightened and who were very much, friendly toward the rabbis. But as far as Christianity goes, yes, I think Judaism views the view of Jesus as a false Messiah, and the way Jesus is understood as being different, certainly, than the Jewish understanding of Messiah. However, I also believe, and I base this on, I think, writings of Maimonides, writings of Rashi, writings of others, that even though, in a sense, theologically, we are in a condition of civil war with Christianity, with two versions of Judaism that emerged out of the destruction of the Second Temple. Nevertheless, we have always understood that the Christian believes in God, and that the Christian believes in the entirety of the Torah, even though they're not required to practice it. And a comment that a little bit of a research I did, this actually came up in my interview.
You want to comment? You said on a Noahide perspective, we would be trying to push people away from Christianity and saying, like, no, we don't want Christians. We don't care that Goyim,
but Christianity,
read the prophets. They have to follow a certain set of morals and ethics. And saying that Christianity gets Goyim to read our text is of actually zero benefit to us. The point is they follow morals and ethics, and from a Noahide perspective,
but Dooovid,
yes, eventually the Goyim are going to realize that Christianity is a false religion
and
stop following it. You're not saying that you don't think that in a vision of most Judaic understanding is that Christianity is it's not going to be kosherized. There's going to be something new.
No,
Christianity is going to fall down as a false religion. As a person who believes in Judaism,
no, I reject that. As I was saying, because Christianity believes in God and because they believe in the Noahide Covenant. Now, in my conversation, and let me get in a word edgewise here, with Timothy Flanders from the Meaning of Catholic. He interviewed me about 2 weeks ago. And my research indicates that St. Paul the Evangelist, who had been a Jew and who became Christian, wanted to evangelize to the Gentile nations, and there was a lot of conflict with him doing so among the early Christian community in Antioch, to the point where they said, you need to go back to Jerusalem and consult with the founding fathers, St. James. James had been, I don't know if he was Jesus's brother, but he was a contemporary, and he, after Jesus's death, he became the head of the church for something like 30 years. And he was very Jewish in many ways, at least culturally. And so Paul goes back to Jerusalem to consult with James. And James said to him after a good talk, you can go forth to the Gentile peoples of the world. However, you have to make sure that they are in accord with and in observance of the Noahide Covenant. And he mentioned several things: not cruel to animals, the murder, all of the various functions, belief in God. And if you do that, then that's fine. And so, in a sense, and this is in the Christian scriptures, I don't know if there's anything in the Talmud that is the equivalent of that, but it seems to me that the concept of the Noahide Covenant, which is in a sense a constitution for the world before Judaism, it transcends all religions. It's not even a religion. It's 7 ethical points that could be observed by atheists. That this is something that is unifying, and that means that even if we do have different religions, and even if as Jews we do not believe that Jesus was the Messiah, we do think that's false. Nevertheless, if people are in accord with the Noahide Covenant, and if they as such believe in God, and the Christians do believe in God, then we're all saved. I mean, we're all ultimately functional. It's actually the Christian particularism that views everyone that does not believe in Jesus as not saved. That's not a Jewish idea. We think that all people are saved if they believe in God. And it's our mission to know God and to try to bring the world to know God.
Yeah, I appreciate, like I've said similar to what you've said thousands of times, but like fundamentally on a logical level, there's a lot of flaws with what you're saying. And basically I said similar to what you said to Adam Green, and a lot of his arguments are pretty legitimately, and I argue a lot with, do interfaith. And these are the conversations we should
I've
be
never talked
having.
to Adam Green, by the way, but I wouldn't mind having him come on the show. He's welcome. But
I was saying that your perspective here, it's like there's a few, multiple points, and one, that Adam Green is making, like, who is this guy Charles Moscowitz that, like, most people don't even know whether he's a Jew or a Gentile, and he's not like a rabbi or head of any organization or have thousands of followers like like the Lubavitch Rebbe or a Hasidic Rebbe, or and then you have these rabbis on YouTube that have hundreds of thousands of views, or these rabbis that have thousands of followers, and they say much more extreme things than you. So you say, okay, Charles Moscowitz is trying to be an apologist for Judaism, and say the more extreme opinions among us are not widely felt. But then you have Adam Green saying, like, no, I mean, Charles Moscowitz, he's not really speaking for what Jews
I don't
really
claim to
think.
speak for anybody but myself. I mean, you know how we Jews, you and I are an example of this, Dooovid. You put two Jews in a room, I mean, you're not going to have agreement. I mean, we're very contentious people. I mean, in the sense, it's the biblical idea that we're stiff-necked people. We can be very stubborn and we can be very contentious with regard to understandings. I mean, the Talmud is filled with that.
But it's Luke Ford's recognition on his own of the dissonance, and that you're trying to defend Judaism, which from, like a Kantian point of view, puts you in group conflict with people in the nation that we reside. And you say, like, a dual covenant, a dual morality system where there's one level of morality for all of humankind and then a higher level of morality for an in-group, versus possibly like an Anglo-Protestant concept where there is no special in-group that has a more heavily, moral system. So you could defend that system. You could claim that it's not in conflict with other people to live amongst them, to have that system, but it is. And, the Talmud points that out, and Jews have always known that, saying our texts and our prophets knew that. And that's why we have these conversations that there is going to be group conflict, and the theory of the Noahide system, but also, like people mention like the law in Israel and Christian, can you try to convert people to Christianity? Like the Detroit Jewish News, I just saw this week, had a letter about a mass mailing of, like a Christian to Jews. And, was telling people to just throw it out. If you get it in the mail, just throw it out. Don't even open it. And, people were writing in letters saying, thanks, they saw it and they looked at it, they could tell what it is, and they just threw it out. And okay, there's some Jew who converted to Christianity and he thinks that's a good thing. And he's reaching out to his Jewish brethren to, to share that. And the mainstream, Jewish organizations say, don't even open, throw it out.
I agree with that, by the way. They should throw it out.
Well, there's a perspective of, is that in conflict with what it means to be an American and or part of a different society? And then you push like, no, there's no conflict to that. Or you say like, yes, of course there's conflict to it. It's tough to live in a majority Christian nation when you think Christianity is blatantly a false religion. And then you say, like, like Luke Ford says, you're not going to get very far as a Jew in America or the West telling people you think Christianity is blatantly a false religion. And then, if you say
kind of a given, of course we think it's a false religion, because if we thought it was a real religion, we would be Christians.
Yeah. So when you say, here's Charles Moscowitz
was the Messiah, I'd be a Christian. I don't believe it, so I'm not. I mean, I believe the Jewish idea. That's not. I mean, that's kind of a given.
So I'm going to put this back on you and bring it home. In that, we said at the beginning, the Jewish theology is that the Noahide Covenant is between people and God directly. It doesn't need a Jewish emissary. So if Christianity, so it is possible that Messiah will come, Christianity will be deemed idol worship, and God forbid that they will have their heads chopped off. And your opinion on the matter means absolutely nothing. Because if objectively Christianity is idol worship, and if objectively the punishment for idol worship is death, the fact that some Jew, Charles Moskowitz, thinks it's not, isn't going to save anybody.
There is no. First of all, it's not idol worship. They believe in
Yeah, but
God.
who are you to say it's not? You said there's a covenant between God and the nations that God said if you commit idol worship, it's possible it's going to cost you your life. And Charles Moscowitz is saying, "Oh, don't worry, it's not idol worship."
Rashi said this too, by the way. It is not idol worship. They believe in God. Idol worship is a whole different story. Paganism is something that is very specific. It's belief in a graven image. It's belief in a false image that is given a godlike quality. Christians believe in God. Now, they may believe in God in a way that we don't believe in God, so don't Muslims, but they still believe in God. And I think that there are plenty of Jewish scholars throughout history who have recognized that, including Maimonides and including Rashi.
There's a lot of mainstream rabbis that hold that Christianity is blatantly idol worship.
Why would they say?
And they hold that eventually, when the Noahide laws are implemented, there will be a death penalty for idol worship.
Why would they say
that's ridiculous? No Jew believes that.
Rabbis? But then I want to talk to them.
Well, that's what Adam Green's constantly playing these rabbis.
Well, fine, but that's not mainstream Judaism.
It is mainstream
Judaism.
No, it's
not mainstream Judaism.
Well, I was saying like 20%. There's even political parties in Israel.
Maybe 3%. I mean, do you think that even the Neturei Karta, are they're busy worrying about Christians being idol worshippers? I don't.
I'm saying what they worry. If you put 2 and 2 together, just for the sake of the argument,
that's ridiculous.
And saying not that any of these people are planning to like overturn churches, but that you say, is Christianity idol worship?
No.
You say, yes, I think Christianity is idol worship.
I want to talk to them.
And when Messiah comes, in the same way that Jews complain about Christian, that like, oh, it's going to be the second coming of Jesus, and if Jews don't accept Jesus, they're going to be destroyed. That yes, a lot of Jews believe that when Messiah comes, that people who continue to do idol worship will be destroyed. And to say yes, that's a mainstream Jewish belief. And you say, okay, like what does it matter? What people believe when Messiah comes? But you're going to say that that's not a mainstream Jewish belief. That's a mainstream Jewish belief.
I would, first of all, no, it's not. And secondly, I would suggest that Jews that believe that Christianity is idol worship.
I didn't say about Christianity. I said, you're putting the extra loop. I said that
idol worshipers.
When Messiah comes, idol worshipers will have to repent or be destroyed.
I agree. I think
so. If Christianity is idol worship, that means Christians will either have to repent or be destroyed.
Worship. They believe in God. Christians are not idol worshipers.
That's your opinion, but it's also when Messiah comes, if God deems Christianity to be idol worship, they're either going to have to repent or be destroyed. If Charles oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Charles told you it wasn't idol worship, but
they are not idol worshipers. Give me a break. Christians believe in God, and so do Muslims, I might add.
Yeah, but who are you to speak on behalf of Christians?
I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody.
I'm pointing out the illogicalness of your belief, because you just said it's an objective judgment between God and the nations. It's got nothing to do with your opinion on the matter. And if God said it's idol worship, that's what it's going to be. Your opinion.
Yeah, but you're the one who's making a judgment about what constitutes idol worship, and and you're actually this strain in Judaism that you refer to, and I don't deny that it's probably there. In a sense, it's almost
deny that it's mainstream. Like I'm saying that those are the mainstream.
I'm about to say,
outsider.
Let me finish my sentence.
I'm saying those guys are the
whatever it is. That's a Christianizing influence in Judaism. Actually, I mean, it's the Christian idea that if you don't believe in Jesus and if you don't go through Jesus, you're going to be going to eternal damnation. That's not a Jewish idea. And the fact that Jews would embrace that,
the Christians just flipped
it. No. The fact that
that's what Jews
embrace that is
Christianizing
in Judaism. We're more universal about that. If you believe in God, then you're saved. We don't say you have to believe in one or a couple of versions of it. It's that if you believe in the God as the creator of the universe and as the giver of the law, which Christians do, then you believe in God. Now, all the other stuff is a matter of theological questions and the issue of Christology. That's a Christian question. It's none of our business. The fact is that by embracing the Old Testament, the God of Israel is the God of Christians by their recognition. They are not idol worshipers. And that, yes, idol worshipers at the time of the Messiah will be punished. That is not Christians. That is not, most Jews do not believe in that. And I'd like to talk about Jews who do, because I think they've been Christianized.
Well, I agree with you. I'm a great defender of Jews and humanity in general. But if you want to say, what do the texts say? What is Judaism? What is the scripture? The scripture is extremely harsh. And the scripture
Toward idol worshippers
says,
I would
at the
argue
end of the days,
idol worshippers.
You're right. It's going to be a choice, and there's going to be the idols.
By the way, there were
And
idol
if people
worshippers.
choose the idol, they'll be destroyed along with your idol. So if you're right, and Christians really believe in God, they will be part of the redemption, just like Hindus or any other group. But if they really believe in the idol, they will be destroyed with the idol. And the fact that Charles is on there saying, like, oh, this Christian, he's a good guy, that might not help him. It's going to be. I think
that a lot of people, idol
and even you yourself, like as a Jew, you're so sure that you're going to be saved. You say, like, no, you might be destroyed with the idol worshippers too. And there's a lot of Jews that think that you're not going to be saved.
No,
there's a lot of Jews that think that Charles is going to be with the wicked people.
To think that I'd be saved. I never commented on that.
But you're commenting that you think the Christians are going to be saved when you know that a lot of Jews don't even think you're going to be saved.
Fine. I would suggest that idol worship can include Jews, and it can include Christians, people in Christian name and Jewish name, and it can include a lot of people. That, it's an interesting subject, what constitutes idol worship today. What I'm suggesting is that Christianity itself, as a theology, as a doctrine, does not constitute idol worship, nor does Judaism. However, individual Christians and even some Christian organizations and some Jewish organizations, one could argue that they do constitute a form of idol worship and that they will not be saved. It has nothing to do. We're talking fundamentally about what Judaism and Christianity believe in, and they both advocate belief in God.
Yeah, so I've been working, I'm calling the multiple truth hypothesis, and to look at it objectively from a metaphysical point of view in terms of general belief about cosmology and eschatology, where if you believe that there's going to be some sort of utopian society at the end of days, and as a religious person, that we're currently living the lifestyle that is going to be the lifestyle in utopia. And
Dooovid, let's give out the phone number. Maybe we'll get some calls, because this is a live show. 617-396-4958 if you'd like to join the conversation. We are doing a live broadcast here. I do a live broadcast Monday through Friday, 12 to 1 p.m. Today, I'm going through till 2 o'clock because I have Dooovid here. By the way, tomorrow I'm having an author on who's written an illustrated children's book on the George Floyd killing, and we're going to talk about that and how children are to understand racism. Right now, Dooovid is my guest. You're welcome to join the conversation, 617-396-4958. Dooovid?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of research. I'm playing a lot of chess, and I've been studying, called the science of expertise, and it's, chess experts are one of the more well-studied parts in the field. And, thinking of the local situation, the politics, where you're saying there's incompetence, you say like on MSNBC, Mayor Bloomberg was being interviewed and saying, you got to hand the vaccine distribution over to the corporations or the GameStop and what's going on. And I spoke to that, Professor Edward Dutton in, Finland, Poland, I guess Richard Spencer's streaming partner. And it didn't even, someone super chatted him, suggested he speak to me. And I reached out. He was on my channel. It's one of my better viewed videos. But he told me that what he's been pushing, I've listened to him, and I think I agree with him, what is called the reverse Flynn effect. And I'm not sure, have you heard of the reverse Flynn effect?
No.
I mean, the Flynn effect was, it's an IQ study, and it's based on IQ racial. The Flynn effect doesn't necessarily have anything to do with IQ and racial or even nature and nurture, but the Flynn effect was decades ago a trend that IQs had been increasing, and the average IQ and the score on tests and ability for a period of time had been increasing over a yearly basis. And so the reverse Flynn effect is that the average IQ has in fact been going down. And the evidence from what Dr. Dutton and others have documented, whatever the controversialness of IQ, is that it's a factual phenomenon that IQ is decreasing. And there's other reasons, as a sociologist or cultural evolutionist or evolutionary psychology would explain that happening. But I'm looking at what's going on, and just say incompetence. And here in Michigan, we have the legislators not approving the governor's appointees because she's keeping this almost over a year now, this government lockdown where she's basically ruling as a dictator. So the Senate, only way to fight that really is to not approve her appointees. But the look is saying like, no, you can't trust the government. They're incompetent. You're better on your own. And if you want to put it on a larger scale, is it possible? And then, you could explain your understanding from all your world knowledge, why that might be the case, that the fact is society, technology, industry was built up a generation or two ago, like the greatest generation, and they were factually smarter than us. And that currently we're actually incapable of running the society that was created for us because factually our IQs are lower.
Well, I mean, I actually don't doubt that. I mean, I don't know. I saw an interesting sociological study recently, which indicates that younger people, probably like the 20-somethings and teens, are experiencing a lot more stress and anxiety than they did in past generations because they're so distracted by this little computer that you carry around with you called the smartphone. People are looking at hundreds of images a day, and it's sort of like, they're not digesting knowledge. There's not as much intellectual growth that comes from reading. People are reading less. I mean, if you take a look, for example, at a conventional American magazine, like let's say Time magazine, back in the 1970s, they went in depth on an issue. You'd have 15 pages of text. Now you might get 3 or 4 pages of text, all interspersed with good pictures and high graphics and big text. And, everything is like these snap images that have flashed before your eyes. And, the MTV phenomenon, that these things may be leading to a certain cognitive decline. I don't doubt that. I think that's interesting.
I was showing, I on the side, I run an eBay business.
No, you have a lot of books there. I see that.
I really have access to thousands. A lot of them mostly come from my father, and my father does hospice, and occasionally he buys stuff off his patients. And I've been selling CDs, but books are worthless. Unfortunately, I was joking about, I was selling the best of the West, the Western classics at discount prices, which really I was. And I had my classical music CDs that my dad very wisely had purchased, and Deutsche Grammophon, which was actually partially founded by Jews in Germany before the war, EMI, all these record labels, but those had quite a bit of value. And CDs, even not worth much, like $2 or $3. But the books, the best of the Western classic, they're literally worthless. Like most of them are worth a penny, a dollar. And a lot of these stuff are things no one even cares about, like these Westerns or these stuff my father read as a kid. And it probably does have value. And just say like, yeah, I mean, we probably are getting less intelligent.
All right, Dooovid, we have a phone call. Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for joining us. Hello. Hi, how you doing?
Is this Charles?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Charles, this is, are you live now?
Yes, we are.
It's when I'm looking at you on the YouTube, it's like a back. I don't really see it live, but listen. I was just my name is Shamis bin Saeed. I think Dooovid knows me.
Okay.
I was going to bring a point about the
retired sociology professor, Moroccan Jew from Metro Detroit.
In the literacy.
Okay.
It's been going on for a long time. Have you heard of the book by Charles Moscowitz?
Yes.
Called the deliberate
dumbing down of America.
Dumbing down of America. Yeah.
I've interviewed her, and my dear friend the late, great Dr. Samuel L. Blumenfeld, who I did hundreds of hours of radio with, and who passed away, I believe, in 2015. He wrote a whole shelf of books about this and phonics and how the modern educators, going all the way back to John Dewey, they introduced things like look-say reading and and other education modalities that were deliberately put in place, according to Sam's research, to dumb down this country, and
that's right,
and did so. So yeah, I mean, thank you for bringing that up. That's a very major factor in what we're talking about.
Right, and the book is backed up by really good empirical research.
Yes,
very good empirical research. It's not just like saying, okay, people are getting bad, and also you got in school there was a term that we use in sociology called the great inflation.
Mm-hmm. Great inflation, you bet.
Great inflation, in which like a C average of now it's just really what I mean by the B average long time ago is not worth like a D or a C average.
Well, what they do is
it's reverse. What it is like they inflate the grades to look good, while in reality the grades do not really reflect the ability of students at all.
Well, what they do is what they do in data research, which is they take the mean, they take a look at the extremes, the A's and the F's, and they go to the median grade, the one in the middle, and they look at wherever that may lie, and they average out the grades, as opposed to actually giving a person a grade based upon who they are and what their merit is. Now, I don't want to get into this because I'll get pulled down from YouTube, but let me just say that there have been more than rumors that certain electronic means of casting votes were involved in some of this in this last election. We can't talk about that because that's verboten. That's verboten. But the point I'm making is that we may not have a situation where you have every vote counted equally, one person, one vote. There may be averages. There may be estimates. There may be computer models. That's all. Let's move on. Let's not talk about that.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to bring that dumbing down of America, since Dooovid was making the point that there is a decline in IQ or literacy in general, like not only the mathematical literacy, but cultural literacy too, like knowledge of things that we used to take for granted in the 1960s and the 70s. Anyway, thanks a lot, Charles.
Very good.
Maybe have Semish as a guest on sometime too. He's a sociology professor.
Yeah,
from
please
Metro
send me a
Detroit.
note. We'll have you on. We'll do a full show. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, so
something else here, Charles.
Yeah.
If someone calls in, like, because it's related to the GameStop, and I mentioned Rabbi Balkany a few times, the brother-in-law of Ravashkin, and it was Steve Cohn who put him in prison, and I was, like a student of Rabbi Balkany. Like I gave Rabbi Balkany an aliyah at Shomer Shabbos like 50 times. Like I was the gabbai there. He came to Mincha. I called him up to the Torah. He even laned himself often. I ate in his house. He was a good man, and Steve Cohn, to some extent, ruined his life. And he was, Rabbi Balkany, God forbid, was probably guilty. And can I tell you about this case?
Sure.
So, Rabbi Balkany was charged with blackmail and trying to force $4 million out of Steve Cohn and threatening to disclose information about illegal activity that Mr. Cohn was doing if he didn't make these donations. And these donations were to yeshivas. Actually, one of them was to Yeshiva Torah Vodaas, and the other was to the rabbi's Om School. And Rabbi Balkany was most famous as a prison chaplain. He got so many people out of prison that he was barred from like the Department of Corrections in Washington because he just kept on going in there to get people out of prison. He was most famous for helping out Leona Helmsley. So and he had a girls' school from Metro Detroit. But in terms of money, like in terms of the Hasidic world, he liked to pay himself. He wasn't like an extravagant like millionaire like Bo Biden or something, but he liked money, and he took money for doing some of these things. And it's very possible that if Mr. Cohn had made this donation,
Hunter Biden, but anyway, go on.
Well, yeah, that he would have paid, himself a few $100,000 for being principal of the school. But you think, okay, here's a rabbi that's trying to raise money for yeshivas and Jewish charities, and he probably did have information, because it turns out that Steve Cohn was guilty of this stuff and had legal problems right after this from this stuff. So Rabbi Balkany, however, in his prison chaplaincy, he knew that there was this guy Steve Cohn, and he was doing this illegal stuff. And this is documented in the case. He was wiretapped, and Steve Cohn went to the FBI, and he told Steve Cohn, like, give me the money, or someone might find out that he's doing this illegal activity. And so the FBI made a deal with Steve Cohn, and they ended up throwing Rabbi Balkany in prison. And it's saying, like, Rabbi, he might have been guilty, God forbid, in technical alleys of the law. He even had the famous Bronfman lawyer defending him and still lost. And it was in the Obama era, right after his brother-in-law, Rabashkin, got sentenced to prison. But Steve Cohn ruined the life of a good man. And he's saying, okay, it's hard to imagine that Rabbi Balkany probably really wanted to raise money for his these institutions, and he may have attempted to blackmail Steve Cohn. But like that, Steve Cohn has this rabbi thrown in prison for trying to collect money from his, and then it turns out that Rabbi Balkany was right, that he was breaking the law. And so Steve Cohn gets zero punishment for the stuff he did breaking the law. And Rabbi Balkany gets thrown in prison for aggressively trying to fundraise for Jewish education. And I thought that was relevant. I don't know, maybe never.
I don't know anything about this. So what happened in that case?
Rabbi Balkany spent like 3 years in prison.
Is he okay now?
I mean, his life was basically ruined. God forbid. He was one of the most prominent rabbis in the country. His brother-in-law was, Rabashkin. He was head of a school. He was a popular lobbyist in Washington. He was a Republican fundraiser. He knew Donald Trump very well. He knew hundreds, thousands of millionaires, billionaires. I'm saying he knew Leona Helmsley. He was the one who was was her rabbinic chaplain in prison.
And what happened to Cohn?
Nothing. I mean, he somehow got his stuff, like somehow he paid a small fine for the illegal activity he was doing, and he went on to become one of the, now he has over $10 billion and owns the New York Mets. At that time, he was a small time, billionaire. And I'm not defending Rabbi Balkany's actions if he did, do something illegal or threaten to give some sort of information.
Yes, that Cohn isn't the kind of guy you cross.
Well, it just seems that, the irony here in America, that this rabbi, who was a pretty good man, had his life ruined. He was thrown in prison, and he was never able to get back on his feet. And I mean, I'm sure he, has a family and he's not poor, but I'm saying, like, he never.
I understand. It ruined his name and his reputation.
And this guy, Steve Cohn, is saying, okay, this rabbi's coming to him, and he's threatening. I mean, even if you're looking at it from Steve Cohn's perspective, it's like, I don't know who the hell this rabbi is. I have no intention of giving money to his charities, and he's threatening to blackmail me. I'm just going to call the FBI and try to have him prosecuted to the full extent of the law. It's like, that's the kind of guy that Steve Cohn is.
It's sad that he had to go to authorities. Maybe he could have handled it.
Steve Cohn, I'm saying as a fact, Steve Cohn had my rabbi, who may have been guilty, God forbid, I don't know anything about the case, but who was a very good man, relatively. He helped out a lot of people. He had him thrown in prison.
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad that Cohn didn't just try to settle it directly with the rabbi and come to some kind of an agreement that might have included giving to the charity that this rabbi wanted him to give to, instead of throwing the book at him. That's too bad. Anyway, I really know nothing about it, but it's interesting.
I mean, it was part of my downfall. My rabbi got thrown in prison.
And this was
Steve Cohn. It was Steve Cohn that did it.
Yeah. 617-396-4958. If you'd like to join us in the final segment, you're welcome aboard. We're talking about any issues and all issues, whatever it is you want to get into within the confines of propriety and community standards. You're welcome to join the program. 617-396-4958. So, Dooovid, yeah, sounds like a sad case. Again, I know nothing about it, but, I'm glad you're mentioning it because, injustice is injustice.
We're saying that, a lot of Jews don't value Jewish education. And you think like Janet Yellen, Steve Cohn is not, I've never heard anybody on any of the things, the complaint about Steve Cohn is that he had a rabbi thrown in prison for trying to raise money for Jewish education. And okay, he might have been an illegal, aggressive fundraiser, but Steve Cohn had a rabbi thrown in prison for trying to fundraise for Jewish education. And I don't think that hurt him in his social circles, and like Janet Yellen and probably like the people in the Biden administration. God forbid, that's probably what they're like. Like they would have a rabbi thrown in prison for trying to raise money for Jewish education.
Because they're so anti-Jewish education, or?
Well, I was saying that it's a value statement of America. You're saying Jewish values are at different values than American. In Jewish values, you could shame wealthy people out into giving charity. You could use some levels of force. Even the rabbinic courts even had levels of force to force charity out of their constituents. And here in America, that's not the case. If a rabbi is an aggressive fundraiser, you could have him thrown in prison. Even Rabbi Balkany, who was one of the most famous rabbis in America at the time, the point the court came down is this Jewish billionaire has a right to say no, and he's not going to give you and stop bothering him.
Yeah, I know. I get what you're saying. It is sad. And religious figures traditionally have hit up big money people to give to various charities. I understand, like, for example, in Catholicism, oftentimes a priest would, tell someone in confession that, hey, you got to pay this much money to that group and this group if you want to have, your sins alleviated. And, there are things like that. And that's their job. I mean, they want to use their position to try to get these very wealthy people to cough up some dough for a good cause. And, so it sounds to me like the rabbi was doing what traditionally religious leaders do, clerics, and should do. So that's sad. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a state of America now. And even say Steve Cohn's probably going to win again, in terms of the GameStop and what's happening.
What does he have to do with GameStop?
Well, he was the major player that was short billions of dollars.
Well, he's going to lose. They're going bankrupt. You're talking about the hedge fund that short sold GameStop. Yeah, they're almost on the verge of bankruptcy now.
I'm saying that's the man who had my rabbi thrown in prison. That's the man who owns the New York Mets. He owns the New York Mets. I'm saying, even if he loses $5 billion, I think he's worth like $14 billion.
This is the case of Schadenfreude then. I mean,
but that's why I mentioned it, saying the GameStop, but he might win, saying that I was looking at the Robinhood. I was watching Kim Iverson that Tulsi Gabbard had spoken so highly of, a streamer. If you could get in touch with her, she's wonderful. I've never spoken with her, but she was saying just something simple, that there's a 2-day grace period on buying a stock that makes absolutely no sense, and it's just there to harm small investors. And the
whole thing is, we now find out this whole thing is rigged against small investors, and the Democrats are the ones who, they're the party of Wall Street. I mean, that's the hedge fund people.
I mean, if you say assigning the blame, it's like, no, you don't even need a bad guys, because the bad guys, God forbid, can be the Jews. You're saying it's the bank, it's the power of finance to overpower the government. You're saying that Joe Biden right now is above his pay grade, as where Donald Trump as president was below his pay grade. And it's a certain level where you're looking at Joe Biden right now, and there's 0% chance he's going to solve these problems and be able to get us out of it. I don't think anyone,
part of the problem, I think.
But the problem is that if you're saying like the government's the only one who could help you, and is going to, we're going to throw you in prison if you try to help yourself, and you have to let these incompetent people try to help you. So Trump, saying he was a flawed figure, and there's a lot of reasons why, if he did lose the election, why he lost was largely his own fault, but he was below his pay grade as president. And, just saying to the point of the law, the system is, it's collapsing, how we're going to deal with it. And just to look at this right now, saying GameStop, like Steve Cohn, and thinking that, that's the reason.
Expose this elitist establishment, entity that I think Biden certainly represents, and his administration. It's a return to the international order, and
I think it's like EMJ. It's more, saying that it's the usury. It's saying like the power brokerage of money and corporate power controls the government. There's no way for the government to get back in control of itself. There's not really a system,
I agree.
mechanism for the people.
We have a debt-based power, and the people that control the debt control the value of our dollar, and they control the currency. And we no longer have a savings-based system where a bank would lend out money that it actually had in its vault, where you as a citizen would have an honest dollar that was worth a dollar. We have a system of debt currency where the federal government borrows money from the Federal Reserve, which is a private entity, and then they pay them back at very high interest rates. It's an interesting subject. It's a little bit beyond what we can talk about right now because we're reaching toward the end of the program. So, Dooovid, let my viewers know where they can get more information about you and your work.
Yeah, I'm on Doovid's my YouTube page, and I do plan hopefully next week on putting out a few of my Ask the Rabbis. I'm probably going to do the Jewish conception of reincarnation and the soul, and I'll go over what the religious texts and the theology say, and then historical. I'll read some academic articles, try to find some PowerPoints, and I'm also going to do the origin of the Jewish-Gentile distinction and the origins of the Noahide laws, and that one's going to be hours because there's so much information and
great subject, really good.
The Greek and Roman law, and just on the worldview, not even Kabbalistically, even mainstream in the Talmud, Maimonides, logicians, and from a Christian Judeo-Islamic, all of this is a parallel to the internal battle inside of our soul, inside of our hearts, and that there's a cosmic battle going on between different peoples and interest groups and forces, but we're all people at the end of the day. All people are capable of complying, with the basic Noahide laws and being just if they should so choose. But on a personal level, is saying the way to perfect the system is to perfect our own hearts and to saying to be the change. And as local rabbi, I mentioned Rabbi Jacobowitz, who was an Israeli preacher who went back to Israel, just how harsh it is to be a preacher of Judaism in America. But saying like small differences make big people. It's not necessarily big deeds that make big people. It's accumulation of small things. And I noticed that like at Starbucks and all these things, that just driving. I'm trying to be a less aggressive driver, but saying that we have to be the change. And Judaism believes that even though there's a fatalistic nature about the dire consequences of free will, it's largely the consequences of free will, but that free will is largely a good thing, and humans collectively are all capable. There's not a single human on the planet that isn't capable of, so to say, making good decisions. So always appreciate
Absolutely.
these partners in Torah, Charles.
Okay, thank you, Dooovid, and I'll talk to you next week.
Yep, looking forward.